Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you'll be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. If you've been inspired by the guests that we've had on the podcast, please like, subscribe, comment, hit notification bells, whatever you can do on the platforms that you're listening on, so that more people have the opportunity of hearing these and engaging in our community. Hello everyone, this is Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and our guest today is Rachel Tucker. Rachel, for people that don't know who you are, can you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
I live here in California, and I have a ministry for pregnant teens and young moms, and I think our mutual connection is evangelism and a heart for the world. So I've been very grateful to be connected to this wonderful family for more than 20 years. And we're an evangelistic organization for young moms. And so we are a support ministry that has three primary goals. First is the women that we serve all have some level of financial need. They could just come from a family that has some financial challenges, or they could, be homeless and living outside. So there's a very wide range of what their need is, but we want to help them get the things that they need to take care of their children in a safe way. So, for instance, here in the United States, there's strict laws about car seats and, the requirements for weight and everything of when a child is in a car. But when you don't have money, then sometimes people will put, baby or toddler child just down on the ground, the floorboard of the car, to avoid the police seeing them so that they won't be ticketed. But it's not safe for children. Or children, sometimes there could be 5 people in a bed, and for an infant that could be not safe. So making sure that people have, babies have food to be nourished, and diapers, and the kind of baby gear that keeps them safe. The second thing that we do is we have a series of life skills education, and those are things that it's really about parenting. It's really about pouring into this generation tools that will make them effective moms. And so we teach, financial planning and how to care for children, conflict resolution, all those kinds of things. But a real big core for that is wanting to prevent violence against women and violence against children. And then our third goal is to open the door for these moms to have a relationship with the Lord.
And then for people that hear this, if they want to find out more, do you have a website, something like that they could go to?
Yes, it is Cherish, CHERISH, ministry.org.
Okay, and we'll put that link in the description. So if you're interested in finding out more, go there and see what they're doing. Maybe see how you can get plugged in, support them. So it's there ready for you to go check out.
So how long has Cherish been going? I mean, I should imagine it was something that unfolded rather than started with a big bang. Can you take us back to the beginning, or as near to the beginning as you can?
Yes. So we were going to a new church, which is the church that we're at now. And they had like a, introduction type of thing. And the head over outreach came to us and said, we've heard about you, that you have been in ministry before. And so if there's a ministry that we're not doing that you want to start, just let us know and we'll support you. Wow. And that didn't exactly turn out to be how that ball bounced, but it was a beautiful statement. And so I just blurted out like, I'd like to start a ministry for teen moms. And then I was like, what in the world, where did that come from? So that was a bizarre incident, but I just left that alone. And so we used to do urban ministry in Los Angeles, in what's known as the housing projects. So this is free government housing. And, it was a lovely idea in the 60s, but it has been horrific in implementation. So the violence in these neighborhoods is very, very intense. Drugs, the gang warfare. So it really came out of a place of compassion, but it's been terrible. So Micah used to do children's ministry in a number of these in LA. And there was a girl, and her mom had died of cancer. Her dad had been in prison all of her life, really. And she was, she was trouble. She could create problems. Even when she was 12 years old, she was fighting adults, but she was so lovable. And so Micah and I were both, really drawn to her, and she considered us family. And I was pregnant with my son Elijah when she was pregnant. Now she was a teenager when she was pregnant with her son, but we both had our boys within a few weeks of each other, and we were pregnant with our daughters at the same time as well. So it was just one of those things that even though I was older, she was younger, we had another connection point. So she was, a really, really tough girl. And one day I got a call, and she was sobbing uncontrollably and couldn't speak. So I call those the Christ scream calls. So you answer the phone and say hello, and the person's just screaming like in agony, and you have no idea what's happening on the other end. And so I'm just waiting and waiting. And, it really hit me so hard because she was such a tough person, and for her to be in this level of agony. And so, she had a new relationship, not either of her children's fathers, with someone that she thought was the sun, the moon, and the stars. And one day he got angry at her. He loaded a gun and had her get down on her knees, and he put the gun up to her head. And so she was begging him to not kill her in front of her kids, because both her kids were there. Her aunt had just been killed by her partner in a very gruesome way. So it's like within 2 weeks. And he didn't listen. He pulled the trigger and the gun jammed. And then he reset the gun and pulled it again, and the gun jammed. So she had called the police, which was a very big thing for her because she came from a neighborhood where you never call the police. And they have found him and arrested him, but she literally was so traumatized that she couldn't talk. And so in this moment where she's screaming and convulsing, the Lord spoke to me, and he said, "This is happening all around you, but you don't know them." And so that was the call to start Cherish. And really what God put inside of me is that, if a woman in our community has a gun put to her head, or is stabbed, or is raped, or is thrown out of a moving car, does she have a Christian's phone number on her phone? And for the vast majority, the answer is no. And so I felt the call for the mothers that were out there that were the most vulnerable, which young moms statistically are the most vulnerable group. Then having a close enough relationship with them that when if they have, the equivalent of a landmine in their life, they are close enough to at least one Christian to call, to get prayer, to get support, to get connected to people who will help in their healing process. And for the outreaches that churches do, many of them are not relationally based. And someone who's in the most difficult season of their life doesn't have anyone that they know well enough to call. So that was really the beginning of Cherish.
Well, that is, for 1,000 reasons, absolutely brilliant, because usually the response is, let's set up an organisation, let's open at these times, let's have people coming and going, what day are you going to be on, what day are you going to be on? And like you say, there is no relational connection, and therefore there's no safety. And if there's no safety, they're not going to speak up and they're not going to ask for help. That is a brilliantly creative opening for the ministry. So that's how it started. Take us forward a bit.
We had it was really sequential, and God really gave me the sequence of how it was going to develop. What's interesting is that I lost the paper that I had written this on, found it years later, and that was the exact sequence of what God had done. So our church had a food warehouse. I started bringing people food. Then we started with a meeting, as you said, and then eventually opened a center. But this whole process has stayed relational, and every mom at Cherish has my phone number, and I tell her, like, God's going to connect your heart to various volunteers. You go and ask them, can I have your phone number? We have a girl at Cherish, and she her mom tried to kill her in a really horrific way when she was a child, 5 years old. And so she suffers from very, very intense panic attacks. And she called me. She felt like she, was going to, didn't want to live. I didn't know where my phone was. And so I didn't discover that she had called for like 4 more hours. But she had connected with the person who's over prayer at Cherish just the week before and put her phone number in her phone. When she didn't get me, she called the prayer person. The prayer person stayed on the phone, stormed heaven. They ended up watching The Chosen together. The light bulbs came on. God came into the situation. She found peace, but she had 2 Christians' phone numbers on her phone. And so, it is so important, the relational aspect, especially for people who don't have a parent to call. In this generation, we know that it's fatherless, but a lot of people are motherless as well. Where the mother is, it's just crazy, literally what some of these mothers do. I remember one cherished mom, her daughter was a teenager. She was pregnant. She had 2 siblings. The mom left. She just went to Las Vegas to be with a guy that she met, and she left her kids. No rent money, no capacity for them to carry on or exist. And this girl was pregnant. She wasn't eating because she was saving the food for her younger siblings, who she, just inherited by her mom's departure. So that's why the relationship component is so important, because I got to come in there and say, number one, we're going to connect you with some different help organizations to stabilize your family, make sure you have food and can survive this horrific thing that your mom did. But also the knowledge to say, if you don't eat, this can be harmful for your body and for your baby. So you can't not eat to prioritize your siblings. That's not the solution. But if that person were invisible in society and didn't have a person who's intersecting this moment, then it could have gone very differently.
Your churches often say that they're places for broken people, and my sister works with anti-human trafficking stuff, and often our kind of follow-up to that is, well, just how broken are you talking about? Because it's a nice phrase to say we're a place for broken people, to whatever degree that is, but they don't necessarily know what that means when you get to the really broken, the rescued from human trafficking, those that have gone through horrific traumatic experiences, some of the people that you have to work with. And how do you, with your volunteers, the people that work with you in this, how do you equip them for that kind of thing? And even, when you're exposed to some of these horrific stories, it can then really have a big impact on you and how you deal with that emotionally and things like that. So how do you work through all that stuff as well?
So we have trainings for both serving in the ministry and mentoring, which is that one-on-one. Our volunteers go to the mom's home to meet with her. And a lot of times that's when you really encounter the fullness of what that young woman is walking through. So there's a variety of things. So there's the whole immersion thing, where I become incapacitated because of the hugeness of your problems and how I can't fix them, or I need to come in and I'm going to I'm going to buy you everything and pay your rent and take care of your kids because I can't bear to see what you're going through. And so, one of the rules at Cherish is that we want the moms to be stronger and more confident on the backside of them being part of this ministry. And if another person comes and takes over, especially for someone who's been abused, I'm just going to take over, I'm going to do everything. We're really communicating a message that you're not capable. And so there's, in everything in the Christian life, there's ditches on both sides, as they say, right? So we can become overly involved, and she thinks that her child's being sexually abused at the dad's house, but the courts aren't agreeing with her, and I can't sleep, I can't deal, I want to move her to another thing, and I want to go to the dad's house. And so you can see that over involvement, and then you can see judgment. So one of our qualifications at Cherish is, can you honor a person who's really broken and continues to make poor choices? But I talked to you, you didn't get better. Now I'm furious. Well, that your anger is an indication that this was about you. You're giving and serving to say, like, I'm so good, I really impacted someone, I'm very effective. Because really, when it's about serving Jesus through the person that he puts in front of you, why in the world would you be angry? So if we're angry at a person for their lack of progress, their speed of progress, and or whatever, that's really an indication that our heart has migrated from a place of wanting to serve Jesus to maybe feeling significant. And so then that becomes a repentance issue. So there's a lot of process. So for instance, in our mentoring program, we have a mentoring coordinator who's checking in with that mentor every week because of a number of things that you said, Andrew. Because if you've gone through traumatic events and you're encountering someone who's incredibly traumatized, and our mentoring materials are for discipleship for unchurched women with trauma. So because of that, if you have something that happened when you were 12 that you haven't thought of in 20 years, but now you're sitting with this person and their story is connecting you with memories, or the materials are connecting you with sudden, memories, then that person needs support in their process. We know that when you reach outside of the church, there's always going to be spiritual resistance. So that's another reason that we're giving that level of support, because a person who maybe they were serving at church, greeting guests, and then you're going to an unsaved person's house, your spiritual resistance just got boosted quite a lot. I don't know why this is happening in my family. I don't know, what's going on, so that we want to support that person in that process, because we don't want them to quit. We don't want to give the enemy a blueprint on how to get us to quit in the future either. So, hey, just make a problem with my kid, and then I'll quit whatever spiritual thing I'm doing. So, and then helping people to see, we really get connected in the process of who Jesus is and how he responds to us. Sometimes people are, impatient, like, I've already told her this 2 times. And then connecting them to, how many sermons have you heard about not making your possessions your identity? You've been saved 30 years, you've heard 15 sermons about this. So could you give away all of your possessions and still feel the same about yourself? Could you move to a terrible neighborhood and live in a small apartment or a flat and still feel positive about yourself? Why? You've heard so many good sermons. We're not living with the full truth that we've been given. And now you've been with this person for 3 weeks. And in 20 or 30 years, you haven't made it to implementing everything that God's told you. So let's be gracious, right? So there's a lot of that. And this person's journey is not your report card. Your job is to love and to reveal Jesus. If you make, your child and your family, or a person that you're discipling, your identity, you're doomed to failure. So your success is your obedience.
So how long do they stay with that one person? Is it defined by time? Is it defined by the person that they're discipling? How, or is it a forever? What is the process once they're connected?
So the process usually takes about 10 weeks, but then because of the relationship that's developed, many of those are forever relationships. So, because, for people who've been wounded very deeply, their usual mechanism says, I'm never going to trust anyone again. When we don't trust anyone, we don't grow. When we trust the wrong people, then we're violated and, harmed again. So being able to enter into a trusting relationship is one of the most important keys for healing. And so developing trust, which I think this is a really important thing in ministry when you're working with people who've experienced really deep pain, is you need to be committed to building trust no matter how long it takes. Because a person can't learn from you spiritually when they don't trust you. And for people who have, very low trust, your process might be a long time, but it's worth it. Just like the work that God does in us over time of teaching us to trust him takes a really long time, frequently, and many times we're extremely resistant. So that's right.
Daniela has had particularly young, teenagers, young women in her life who've been very wounded. And she has ended up being very wounded by them over certain things. And on one occasion she came back and she was just broken, absolutely broken. And she said, nobody tells people that when you help wounded people, you can end up being wounded too, and it's a cost you have to count ahead of time. You can't just give up because a wounded person wounded me, so I'm not going to help anybody else. But it can be really upsetting, to put it mildly. Surely that must happen along the journey with some of these mentors, with these girls.
Yes, and it does. So I think for me personally in that process, the perspective is gigantic, because I think about missionaries who leave their families and leave their possessions and leave food that they enjoy eating, and they go to a country and their blood, sweat, and tears is shed there to reveal Jesus and to bring the gospel. And sometimes they're killed by the people that they're the very people that they're sacrificing for. Obviously, we go all the way, to Jesus in that process. But the perspective of that, and one of the things that I do is I have quotes from great people in church history. When I'm personally overwhelmed by the brokenness, my keys are missionaries and great people from old who were always persecuted and resisted and had the good that they were trying to do, turn back on them. It gives me a lot of perspective for the unkind words or the disappointment or whatever I'm going through in that moment. Now, as far as people who are just starting their journey, then it can be a lot more crushing because they don't have the perspective that I have from a couple decades of ministry to people who are broken. So I think that that can be really tricky, because when we experience pain, the enemy always wants to put a message with the pain, because you're experiencing this pain. And then because of the pain, sometimes we accept messages that are totally evil, that are totally lies, but the pain allows the message to go into our heart. I'm never going to blah, blah, blah again. Never going to extend myself for anyone. I'm only going to be working with, the good enough. Okay, well, Do you hear yourself? I'm only going to be working with people who have already, I had someone tell me, like, I only enjoy working with people who are in the church. Do you hear yourself? Go into all the world and speak amongst yourselves. you know?
I think, too, what we forget is we're broken.
Yes.
Oh, we're broken. I mean, go out there and find a person who's not broken, and actually they won't need you. So, I mean, yeah.
It's really true. I think that when you experience rejection or people turning on you, or these things, it allows you to come into Jesus in a different way. Like generation after generation. I mean, people are stupid in such predictable ways. The fact that God has the patience to deal with another generation after, the dog returning to vomit is just the human experience, right? This brought me brokenness before. How can I get back to that as soon as possible? And get the patience of God. And one night I got a call. It was like 11 o'clock at night or midnight. And the person who was on the end of the phone was, very excited or whatever. I think that they were high. I said, Rachel, I just really want to go to church. We've been talking about it, and we need God, and we really want to go to church. And I said, well, do you know of a church? They were living in a different state. Do you know of a church by you? Like, we haven't been to church here. Do you have transportation? No, we don't have any transportation. Or we'll really want to go this Sunday. My cousin lived in that city. And so I called my cousin and I said, here's the number of these people. They said that they want to go to church. 10 to 1, they're not going to go. But I still want you to arrange someone to pick them up. As a personal favor to me, even though I do not think that you're going to be successful, just out of your relationship with me, would you try? And the Lord spoke to me and said, that's what I ask of you every day. Just out of our connection, as a personal favor to me, you're probably not going to be successful, but just because of me, because I care about this person so much, would you try? And that statement has saved me over and over again. And so that's something that I share with people when they really experience it. It's really loving Jesus, because he sees this person. And just because we love him, he's asking us, will you try? So we can't get caught up in the success or failure. It's about Jesus seeing this person and sending us to them.
I love that. Will you do it as a personal favour to me? As I say, Rachel, as we're getting near the end, can you tell us a story or two of, because stories are very powerful. Give us a story or two from Cherish of on the positive side of what
women's come through.
Yeah, people.
Because you have had women go through, and now they are volunteers.
Yes.
And help. So you've had people that kind of go right through the whole process, and now are going back to help other people along the journey that they've just walked across.
Yes. I had there's someone I dearly love, She was 17 years old. She came to us when she was pregnant, and her boyfriend was in jail. And she came to Cherish. She got built up, and she had her baby. I think he was still in jail. When he came out, she said, "I'm going to live for Jesus, not having sex again till I get married. And you're either going to get on board with this, or God will give me someone better than you." And he got on board. They got married, and they have been serving as pastors.
Wow.
So she was one of my favorites. I had a girl one time, she was going through mentoring with me. And there's this moment of the first chapter of our mentoring book is on salvation. And so there's a question that says, think about the worst thing that you've ever done. And so she, it's not one of those things that you have to answer out loud. And so she told me, this very cryptic statement. It's not what I've done, it's what I'm thinking about doing, or it's what I'm going to do. Well, that's a very interesting thought. Anyway, she the day before, she had an abortion scheduled. She had a toddler, so she couldn't bring. When she came to her abortion appointment with her toddler because she didn't have a babysitter. They said, "You can't have a child here." So she had to reschedule. She was planning on having an abortion before she was going to see me for her first mentoring appointment, so that by the time she saw me, that it would have already been too late, and whatever conviction came into her heart while we were talking, there was nothing that she could do. And so we sat there and had a conversation, and she chose to keep the baby. A few weeks later, she sends me an ultrasound picture and says, "Rachel, I'm pregnant with twins." So that moment was not just about one baby, but about two, who were the cutest things on earth. And this girl is so anointed by God to speak. I say girl, she's a woman now. She's so gifted, and God has worked so powerfully in her life. I do think that she's like this torch for her generation, and her life really turned at that moment.
Wow.
There's so many. There was a girl that I don't know what the British equivalent to our foster care system is, but there was a girl who she was in foster care. All of her siblings had been taken, and she got pregnant and she was homeless. But there was a woman who served at Cherish who worked for Starbucks, and she said, "Rachel, I feel like God's putting this girl on this, young woman at Cherish on my heart, and that I'm supposed to give her a job." So I said, "Okay, go for it." The girl's very smart, she's very capable, but she, didn't have parents to cover and protect her, growing up, and was in some pretty tough circumstances. And so she gave her a job. The girl, at the beginning of her time being at Starbucks, she didn't have the right shoes for the job and the different things. And so this manager really worked with her to enable her to be successful. She did extremely well at Starbucks. She, got a car. She got an apartment. She was promoted, and she got custody of her sister to get her out of foster care. And what happened out of that is a program began at Starbucks through this manager to help young moms and foster care youth who might not have an opportunity at Starbucks otherwise to have preferential hiring under this program. So it's the spark of listening, and I totally believe, there's a pastor that said one time, when Jesus multiplied the fishes and loaves, why didn't he feed them Mexican food? So we're all just looking at each other. We don't know the answer to this. And he said, because the fish and loaves were what that boy had. God always will multiply what you have, not what you don't have. So what do we have that he can multiply? We have love, we have kindness, sometimes we have resources, sometimes we have expertise, we have intercession, we have knowledge of the kingdom. God will multiply what you have if you will utilize it. But what you don't have, and our focus can always be on what we don't have. If I was more like this, if I had this degree, this certification, if I were older or younger or thinner or smarter, what do you have that God can multiply? And are you willing to trust him enough to use what he's given you?
As we finish, there may be people listening that maybe you're interested in doing something like this where they are, but
Yes.
have no idea how to even get started. They have no materials. They've got nothing to help them. Is this something that you can do, that you can help others to do this kind of thing? Presumably, they could go to the website and get in touch if they want to do something like that.
Yes, we have a start guide. That would be the launch point, which actually does point you to what are the needs in your community and what are the resources with you and your church. So you're actually trying to pair, what's happening where you live, which social services and the police. I mean, not many people stand and interview the police, but they're a great resource of what's happening in your community that you might not know about. So there's a start guide, and then we have resources. We have the teaching tools, we have mentoring tools. So there's a lot that would help somebody to get started. We have moms that have come, I think, from 36 or 39 cities in California to Cherish. That is a disgrace, because there ought to be a resource in their community that they can go to. Most young moms do not have their own transportation. We would love to see this not only multiply in cities and in communities and in towns, but across the nations, which we didn't get into that, but there is a bit of that as well, where we worked with, for instance, women who have had children in war zones, and neither their community, nor the community of the person who got them pregnant wants this child. And so really God's vision for that child coming in. Children are not valued by their circumstance or even how they were conceived. It's about recognizing God's plan for that child and us coming into agreement with that. So, and agreement for that mom, for God's purpose for her. So I would absolutely love to see Cherish multiplied across the globe, particularly for women who conceive children in very adverse and difficult circumstances. They need people with God's eyesight for them and their child, because they have a lot of voices in their life who believe that both they and their child are worthless. And so Yes, Andrew, if there's anyone who's listening that wants to start Cherish or a similar organization, similar ministry in their neighborhood, it's not complex. You need availability and you need love. So, and we have the tools to get you started.
Okay, so I encourage people that are interested either on that front or just in some kind of supportive role, go to the description box. The link is there. Go have a look around the website. Rachel, thank you so much. It's always good to see you, always good to chat. It's been too long, but thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. Love you guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Remember, if it inspired you, share it with others so we can see more people engaged in this community.